Number 10. Zoom robbery. A lot of people turned to Zoom for their fitness classes due to pandemic lockdowns. In November 2021, however, one such class in South Africa turned into a true horror show. Lawrence Masingi was a popular fitness coach who used to stream his lessons to over 200 viewers on Zoom. His reach wasn't limited to just South Africa either. In fact, people from all over the world attended his classes to get fit. Not to mention, he also helped people with their mental issues and made a name for himself in the fitness community. On a fateful November afternoon, though, he delivered what would end up being the last fitness class of his life. About 40 minutes into his Zoom cardio session, someone broke into his home in Soulsville, South Africa. While viewers were puzzled about this hooded intruder, they didn't quite gauge what was happening until they heard two loud bangs. The robber shot Lawrence in the head as 200 people watched in utter horror. What's more, he then proceeded to unload 2 more rounds into Lawrence before running away. Lawrence died on the spot. No one from his class knew what to do. They just kept staring at his lifeless body. And while some people who had a rough idea of where he lived did call the emergency services, it took almost 40 minutes for the paramedics and police to arrive. That being said, despite a Twitter campaign demanding justice for his cold-blooded murder, the identity and motive of the killer remain a mystery to this day. Number 9. Disgruntled trainer. We've all heard stories about some personal trainers being fired from their jobs for overstepping their boundaries. That's exactly what happened at a Florida gym in April 2017. The events that unfolded shortly after, though, were nothing short of a tragedy. 33-year-old Abeku Wilson was a fitness trainer at an Equinox location in Coral Gables. He was considered one of the most popular trainers at the gym. In fact, he'd even appeared in various print brochures for his chiseled physique. Nobody knew at the time Wilson was struggling with some inner demons. Apparently, Wilson had the tendency to get angry real quick, which led to violent behavior. This happened multiple times. The gym's general manager, Janine Ackerman, had no choice but to fire him for workplace violence. Wilson didn't take kindly to his firing and actually had to be escorted off the premises. But that wasn't the last they'd seen of him. The disgruntled trainer returned a couple hours later with a gun. He opened fire on both Ackerman and another trainer, Marios Hortis. Before anyone could even react or call the police, Wilson turned the gun around and shot himself. Wilson was dead, while Hortis was still conscious and bleeding. Ackerman, albeit unconscious, was barely holding on to life. Sadly, despite a helicopter escort and a swift trip to Jackson Memorial Hospital, both of them eventually succumbed to their gunshot wounds. Number 8. ROID rage. Getting ripped takes some serious dedication and discipline. While there are some shortcuts to bulking up, their side effects are perhaps a bit too intense for them to be worth it, as this former bodybuilder discovered. 21-year-old Joshua Antonio Williams was a bodybuilder from Auckland, New Zealand. He always wanted to compete in professional competitions to show off his body. He was already pretty ripped, but for him, that wasn't good enough. So he did what most young and impressionable people do: anabolic steroids. Within months, he doubled his size and was winning bodybuilding competitions like there was no tomorrow. What's more, he'd also started dating a former Playboy model, Sarah Harris. Little did he know, however, that things were only going downhill from there. Williams went from a fitness freak to being just a freak. Modeling firms started rejecting him because his body was too big. His friends alienated him due to his anger issues, and of course, his romantic life was in ruins too. Apparently, it was all because of his obsession with roids. According to him, not only did the extra testosterone result in hair loss, testicular atrophy, and a total loss of sex drive, but it also led to severe depression, paranoia, and anxiety. Not to mention, he regularly found himself getting mad at people and getting into fights. He was, in every meaning of the word, at rock bottom. That's when he decided to forego his steroid addiction, and now almost 7 years later, he's thriving and discouraging other people from making his mistakes. Number 7. Side hustle. Personal trainers giving you some steroids to get bulky is one thing, but this trainer from Detroit took things to a whole other level. 49-year-old Richard Franks was a certified personal trainer and assistant manager at Powerhouse Gym in Highland Park. He'd served almost 12 years in prison for previous convictions that include carrying concealed weapons and a second-degree homicide as well. He didn't learn much from his time in prison though, because even a healthy lifestyle and his job couldn't keep him off the path of crime. He got a side hustle as a drug dealer and started selling meth and crack cocaine at the gym. Drugs weren't the only thing he was selling. He also started selling weapons, including big rifles. Unfortunately for him, one of the gym members tipped the police about his suspicious dealings, so when they followed him back to his apartment, they found it all: the drugs, the guns, the whole shebang. Frank was then arrested on the spot. What's more, he even confessed to his crimes in the police interview. He's now facing 3 drug and weapon-related charges. Number 6. Way too much coffee. In January 2021, a Welsh personal trainer ordered a bag of caffeine powder mixture to get his heart rate going before work. Little did he know, however, that he'd grossly underestimated the punch this drink was packing. 29-year-old Thomas Mansfield, who also had a side hustle as a security guard, was very excited to receive his 100-gram packet of caffeine powder to make supplement drinks at his home. So much so that as soon as he got the delivery, he rushed straight to the kitchen to try it out. Now here's where things got iffy. The recommended serving of the powder was somewhere between 60 and 300 milligrams. Mansfield, on the other hand, only had a digital scale that started from 2 grams. Not thinking much about it, he just made a quote-unquote mid-range 5-gram serving of the powder, thinking it'd just be a bit stronger. So what? Well, turns out that tiny serving was equivalent to almost 200 cups of coffee. As soon as he chugged it down, he knew something was wrong. He collapsed onto the sofa while clutching his chest and frothing at the mouth. His wife Suzanne was right next to him while this was happening. She ran outside to get help from neighbors and nearby family members and called for an ambulance. When the paramedics arrived minutes later, the situation had already gone way out of control. They had to use a defibrillator due to Mansfield's grossly abnormal heart rhythm. Minutes later, he went into cardiac arrest. He was rushed to the hospital, but the fitness trainer was pronounced dead that same afternoon. A post-mortem found he had almost 400 milligrams of caffeine per liter of blood. For context, the fatal dose is anything higher than 78, so he was basically a goner the second he decided to chug the drink. Mansfield's death was ruled as misadventure by the coroner, and he left a widow and 2 kids behind. Number 5. False alarm. In May 2019, a British personal trainer was found dead in the Bahamas, with all signs pointing toward a homicide. But after some thorough investigation, it turned out to be a totally different case. 29-year-old Danny Lee was a trainer from Bucknell that had been working on the island for a while. When Bahamas police officers found him lying unresponsive in a front yard in eastern New Providence, the news made headlines. He was the nation's 34th homicide victim in 2019. What's more, the local press reported that he'd been beaten over the head and that his killer was on the loose. After an autopsy and thorough investigation, it was discovered that Danny hadn't been murdered at all. Instead, he died of a steroid and cocaine overdose. Merely hours before his death, Danny had sent messages to his girlfriend saying he needed to stop taking steroids because they might give him a heart attack. Not to mention, he'd been having chest pains for a while too. These weren't the only side effects of his ROID addiction, as according to a neighbor, he'd become agitated and angry as well. On top of that, a further post-mortem and toxicology test showed no evidence of an attack. His death was eventually attributed to anabolic steroids and cocaine. Number 4. Freight train. People tend to do all sorts of risky stuff to get a viral video on the internet. In March 2015, a personal trainer from Atlanta flew a bit too close to the sun. 30-year-old Travis Williams, also known as Achilles, was a renowned fitness guru with a large following on social media. While he was mostly known for his private camp called Team Fitness, he also uploaded workout videos on YouTube every now and then. Of course, most fitness freaks are also daredevils, and Williams was no different. He wanted his video to stand out against the billions of other workout videos on the internet, so he decided it'd be a good idea to shoot next to some tracks near Buckhead as the train passed through behind him. Sadly though, he'd vastly underestimated the width of the oncoming train. As a result, the inevitable happened. Yep, as he was jumping rope, the train sideswiped him, with an impact that spelled the end of his life on the spot. Williams' friends and loved ones then took to social media to express their heartbreak. Interestingly, this wasn't the first incident of its kind, as another bodybuilder, Greg Pitt, had died only a couple of months before the incident under eerily similar circumstances. Number 3. Fake it till you make it. Fitness trainers obviously love to flaunt their bodies. After all, they put in a ton of work to get shredded. But this Florida bodybuilder's social media posts showing off his body actually landed him in federal prison. Zachary Barton, who's a U.S. Army veteran, claimed he had PTSD and physical disabilities due to his time serving the country. According to him, he couldn't even lift 10 pounds. This allowed him to access extra veterans benefits, including healthcare and monetary compensation. In reality, though, he was faking it all, albeit pretty convincingly. In fact, during one of his doctor visits, he even dropped his book, showing he was really weak. Plus, he also said he had other conditions including insomnia and incontinence. It was also discovered he'd never even been in combat. He made up stories to get a better disability rating. He couldn't live this life forever though, because according to his wife's social media posts, the dude was jacked. Not to mention, he actually graduated as a personal fitness trainer in 2016 and was competing in bodybuilding competitions. What's more, the social media page was filled with him lifting weights heavier than 600 pounds. It all caught up to him, and now he's been sentenced to 12 months in federal prison and over $240,000 in restitution. Yikes. Number 2. Jealous Rampage. In April 2019, a California fitness trainer went on a jealous rampage as he scoured through apartments looking for his ex-girlfriend and the new person she was seeing. 44-year-old Jamone Rayon Buggs was a personal trainer in the Newport Beach area and seemed like a normal guy, for the most part, at least until he decided to grab a gun and go through his neighborhood looking to murder someone. Seemingly, he was on the lookout for his ex-girlfriend and a man named Jared, whom he assumed was her new boyfriend. But rather than actually looking for them with a rational mind, he was engulfed in rage and decided all out instead. First, he broke into a random Irvine apartment with people he didn't know. When he realized they weren't the people he was looking for, he still fired a shot towards them and fled the scene. He was later arrested in connection with a series of attempted burglaries at the apartment complex, which meant he'd done the same thing to a bunch of other people too. Merely a week after his shenanigans though, 2 people, Wendy Miller and Darren Parch, were found dead at a nearby condo. They were last seen together at a bar in Laguna Beach when Miller offered to give Parch a ride home before they were shot to death at his apartment. Now here's the curveball. Guess who was the prime suspect? Yup, our rage-filled trainer Buggs, who in a moment of madness and jealousy, allegedly shot the victims during another one of his senseless rampages. He was then charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Number 1. Serial Abuser. 28-year-old personal trainer Michael Howe was a fitness freak. He coached boxing and kickboxing at a bunch of gyms across Merseyside and Liverpool. His social media mantra was all about transforming lives. Only that, as it turned out, he was actually making them worse. Howe was a serial abuser. He had a terrible habit of taking his anger out on women foolish enough to date him. That's what happened in March 2020. He noticed his girlfriend at the time receiving a text from an ex-partner and he lost it, resorting to violence. He kicked her onto the floor and claimed he was disciplining her. He told her that she needed discipline, that she was spoiled, and that if he didn't discipline her, she would never learn. That was only the beginning though, as things escalated a couple of days later. He accused his girlfriend of telling a friend he was insecure and went into full rampage mode. He started beating the poor woman again. Oh, and this time, it was way worse. He dragged her around the house by her hair, hit her multiple times, kicking her, beating her with a keyboard, choking her, and banging her head on a radiator. Howe went to some pretty brutal extremes. He then spat in her face and warned her he'd kill anyone if they found out what he'd done. This wasn't the first time he had done this either. Months prior, he was dating a different girl. He threatened her and hurt her enough she went to the police. Howe was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison and suspended for 2 years for battery and criminal damage against the ex-girlfriend. When news got out that he was abusing yet another girl, the judge didn't go easy on him. He was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison. Thanks for watching. If you could take steroids and get ripped without the side effects, would you do it? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.